What's up guys, and welcome back to Madman Music. In today's video, we're going to talk about the thing that no guitarist likes to talk about. In fact, when you go to talk to a professional about this very thing, they usually tell you, don't stop what you're doing, don't do it, don't make any rash moves. And that's, of course, how to adjust the truss rod on your guitar. This has been like, I don't know why, but this, for some reason, for a lot of guitar players, this is like the scariest thing to do. And with good reason. But today, I'm going to show you how to adjust it like a pro so that you're not going to mess up your guitar. Let's get into it. Alright guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for stopping back by. Before we jump in, you know the routine, you know the drill. Like, subscribe. When you're done watching this video, please do me a favor. Head over to patreon.com/madmanmusic. Become a patron because that helps this channel out immensely. How do you know when you need to adjust your truss rod? The first indication will definitely be just fret buzz. If you're starting to notice that when you're playing, suddenly there's a lot of extra buzziness happening, this is probably a good indication that you may need to adjust your truss rod. And then of course, dead notes. There will be times when suddenly you just have no note when you're playing on a particular fret. That can be a little bit confusing. We'll talk about more of this in a later video, but there could be some fret issues that cause that as well. Uneven frets, things of that nature. But in this case, once you start to hear a bunch of fret buzz, you know that you're probably in maintenance territory. And for those of you that don't know, truss rods are this nice little piece of metal that's running inside of the neck of your guitar that when you adjust it, actually bends the neck back or forth. You're trying to find the optimum balance between having low action so that you can actually play the notes, but then also having enough bow in the neck to allow the strings to go across all of the frets with no fret buzz. This is a really difficult thing to balance sometimes. And in most cases, it's actually recommended that you just make sure that the neck is mostly flat. So let's just come right out and say it. You don't really want this thing to be bowed all that much. And if you do have it bowed, it will be bowed in this direction towards the bridge of the guitar to allow relief in the neck, and it's only going to be by about maybe a millimeter. You can take one of your guitar picks and essentially right around the 5th, 6th, 7th fret, when you sit here and you hold the first fret and you hold one of the frets that's near here to where it connects to the body, something like the 15th, 17th, something like that, depends. Anywhere in this region, you're going to start to see the bow right here in the 5th, 6th, 7th fret area. You'll see this dip that's there. And if it's a noticeable dip, it's already too much. I'm telling you that right now. It should be slightly dipped. Maybe no thicker than the width of your guitar pick. So when you're doing that, you look at that, and if it looks like it's that thick, then it's already too much. Should be fairly flat, but you definitely don't want the strings to be laying across the frets. That is a back bow, and that's where you're going to be experiencing tons of fret buzz, like I am right now. Let's talk about a couple of reasons why I might be experiencing fret buzz. For one, I am doing this from a basement in Germany. Many Americans may not realize this, but German houses don't have air conditioning. So when it's cold as and when it's hot as I moved into this house 6 months or so, and it was the middle of winter, so it was cold and dry. Now we're pushing into summer. It's finally starting to get real hot outside, and it's also starting to get a little bit humid. So in my basement here, I'm experiencing the sudden rise in temperature, like within a week, and some excess humidity in the room. Those things can wreak havoc on your guitar if you do not take care of them and maintain this kind of stuff. Now in the States, most everybody has central AC for the most part. I know up in the New England area, up in the north, yeah, you get away with not needing so much air conditioning, similar to the way that we have it here in Germany. But if you're living down in Florida, that AC is cranked 24/7, 365. That air conditioning kind of maintains the temperature of your guitar for the most part. Now this has nothing to do with touring musicians and going out on the road and experiencing all the different things that the environment throws at your guitar on a touring basis. But if you're hanging around at home and you're suddenly noticing this kind of a thing, you might want to go ahead and check to see if something else is going on. Maybe there's too much humidity in your house. Maybe the temperature has changed drastically. You can almost expect that if you're going from your guitar being very cold all the time, and then within a few days' time, it's suddenly very warm, you're gonna have adjustments to make. If you're only going to have a few days of this kind of warmth, you might not want to do anything at that point. Don't touch your guitar, because if it's going to be warm for 2 or 3 days and then it's going to go back to being cold or cool, your guitar might adjust back in some cases, right? Just don't make any rash moves. You don't want to jump to make a bunch of crazy moves, because then you'll just find yourself adjusting this thing all the time, and when it's out of whack, it's not going to be pretty. But I know for a fact we finally have summer here. It's the middle of June, and it's finally summer here in Germany. So it's warm, and I know that I'm gonna have warm weather for the next few weeks, couple months, before it will start to cool off again. So this is a good time for me to say, okay, I've got excess fret buzz, let's take care of it. The easiest way to see visually if you have a bowed neck in any which direction is some kind of a straight edge. Now, I just have this metal oversized ruler. They make specific straight edge tools for guitars. There's plenty of them. I'll link, of course, all kinds of goodies down below that will help you do this kind of thing and maintain stuff. I'm just using something like this. It should be fine, but you definitely want something that at least covers the entire fretboard. My ruler, of course, goes much further. This poses some other problems. Generally, if my pickups are too high, this won't work because it does go all the way down past into my pickups. But luckily, on this guitar, the way that I have it set up is it clears the pickups. They're not touching, so I can actually see that my neck is bowed like this. That's a fun sound, right, on your guitar? But what this means is that this part of the neck is bent backwards, and I need to adjust the truss rod to give the neck some relief, because the truss rod is actually working too hard to pull my neck down, to pull it back, right? So I need to give it a bit of relief so that the wood of the neck and the tension of the strings will actually pull it back this way and give me a little bit of a bow. So the first thing we do, we check it with our handy straight edge. We see how badly it may be bowed and in which direction. Again, this works in the opposite way just as well. If you have too much bow, you can put this straight edge down here and you can actually see somewhere in this vicinity, around, you know, the 10th fret or so, somewhere in that middle section. It depends on the scale of your guitar, how many frets you have, things like that. So it's a little hard to pinpoint that, but just imagine the middle of your neck. Somewhere in here, you're gonna see a very visible bow or lack thereof. Right now, again, I have a back bow, so I'm seeing the spaces up here by the nut and down here by the 24th fret, where it's meeting the body, where my neck meets the body. So these are the spaces that I'm seeing that, oh wow, this is bowed like this, which means it's bowing backwards and my strings are getting too close to the fretboard itself, which is creating that fret buzz. Or possibly even dead notes. If I went through every note on the guitar, I might find some notes that don't ring out at all, which is the worst possible scenario. Once you've determined with your straight edge that you've got a particular bow in a certain direction and your neck is not flush and straight, which is what you want. You want it to be flush and straight. How many times? I gotta say it a few times. Like, don't allow your neck to be bowed. Some slight relief is okay, so some slight relief. Having a little bit of a dip right here is okay, but I'm telling you, no thicker than the width of your pick. And that's not much, so just shoot for it being mostly straight. So the next thing that we need to do is we're gonna take off this truss rod cover and we're gonna look inside and see what kind of a tool we need to adjust this neck. There are multiple types of truss rods and multiple ways to adjust them. So let's pop this cover off of here and let's see what's going on inside. Okay, now that we've popped this thing open, we've determined that it takes a sort of socket key. Now, of course, your guitar should come with whatever key it requires to adjust your truss rod. So, if you bought it brand new from the store and it came in a box, you're definitely going to have a little plastic baggie full of Allen wrenches and maybe one of these. This is what you need in order to adjust the truss rod. Some take Allen wrenches. What do we have to do in order to make sure that we're adjusting this thing in the right direction? Well, righty tighty, lefty loosey. Just sort of remember that. It's the same concept of adding tension and removing tension. When you make it tighter, so when you righty tighty this thing, you're adding tension. You're making the truss rod work. So that is going to pull the neck backwards. It's going to pull it down or behind you or whatever. It's going to give you a back bow. Another really good thing to note is when you are changing your strings, if you're changing your strings a lot, you very well may have the symptoms of adjusting your truss rod. Because if you go from a heavier gauge to a lighter gauge, you've now lessened the tension of the entire guitar, and that will result in the truss rod overworking. You'll have to then give it a little bit of relief to balance out the lower tension of the strings. So keep that in mind. If you're trying different string gauges, you, after 2 days of putting lighter gauge strings on your guitar, you might notice that suddenly half of your notes have disappeared and you got fretboards all over the place. Or the opposite. If you put super heavy strings on your guitar, you might all of a sudden realize that the strings are this far away from the fretboard. Well, that's because this is a balancing act. As we've talked about with the Evertune system and all of the different tension related things that are going on with that, it's no different. Everything on your guitar is a balancing act. It's trying to make sure that all these things work together in order to give you the most comfortable playing guitar. Back to our tool, back to our righty tighty, lefty loosey. In this case, we have a back bow, so what do we need to do? We need to give it some relief. We need to relieve some tension, right? Relieve the tension. We gotta relieve the tension. Alright, this is getting weird really fast. So let's go ahead and make a slight adjustment. Mega huge pro tip. When you make adjustments to your truss rod in either which direction, do not make large moves. In this case, what you want to do is you only want to turn the truss rod 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn. You will see that it will work really fast. And also, again, like I mentioned, it may take a little bit of time for it to fully adjust. If you make large adjustments, they may seem right, they may seem perfect right off the bat, but what's going to happen is in 2 days it's going to adjust and it's going to be even worse. So it's always better to do little tiny micro movements so that it will adjust over time. Give it a day. In most cases, guitars like ESPs, in my experience, have had really, really super tough truss rods and necks that really work very well together. Most of the time when I adjust any of my truss rods, I don't have this crazy backlash if I wait a day or two. But in some cases it does happen, so be wary of that, especially if you're using a super thin style neck. Now this is a 7-string, it's got a little bit extra body to it, but if this was a 6-string that was wafer thin, then you're probably going to experience a little bit of runoff from your adjustment after a day or two. So be mindful of that, because you don't want to make this adjustment and then a day and a half later have it be all out of whack. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it some relief, and I'm actually going to lefty loosey loosen the tension of my truss rod. Let's do that now. So we're going to go ahead and put that inside, and then just small turns. We're going to give it a 1/4 turn. And for every 1/4 turn, go back and check with your straight edge how much more relief it might need. Now in my case, this back bow is horrendous. So we're gonna have to go. Let's give it, this is about 1/2 turn of relief now. And I can already tell that it's getting slightly better. But we're gonna need a little bit more. Also be sure to check across different points of the neck. So start in between your lowest string and like the E and the A, or the B and the E, and the same thing, B and the E on the top side. So you want to check the top, the middle, and then also the highest points. And when you do that, that's making sure that the neck actually isn't twisted. That's a whole different topic. Thankfully, we're not dealing with a twisted neck. So now I've adjusted this thing a good amount because it was pretty bad. I don't want to do this too much more, or else I'm probably going to be regretting it tomorrow. At this point, that back bow is really, oh man, it's almost gone. It should be super smooth when you make these adjustments. Once you get to the point in any direction, whether you're tightening it or you're loosening your truss rod, once you get to the point where you feel resistance, stop. Do not keep adjusting, because what that means is you're at the end of this tension. Imagine this thing is sort of like it's like a screw system that is working sort of as it twists. And you'll get to the point where it stops. It's done. Don't push it anymore or you will break your truss rod, and that's going to be a problem. So let's check this thing once more. And that feels 1,000 times better. I think I still need a little bit of relief, but I'm going to give it a day and I'm going to see how it feels tomorrow. Maybe I'll have to actually add a little bit of tension because it will adjust from there. Again, you always want to let this thing sit for about a day. Now for touring musicians, you don't really get this much time. You got to just go with it on the fly, and you sort of learn to play your guitars as they're adjusting. But in most cases, again, micro adjustments. Take good care of your guitars. Keep them in well-ventilated, climate-controlled, if possible, places so that you don't have to deal with these adjustments too often. Remember, when you're changing strings, you're probably going to have to do that. And remember that when you make adjustments, to make them very, 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 very small. All right, now that we've gone through and adjusted the truss rod and my neck is pretty much dead straight, let's hear what it sounds like. Sounds pretty great, feels perfect. I think we hit this one right on the nose. So just as a little bit of an example, I have this other ESP Horizon. This is an old vintage guitar from the early 90s. It's been with Propane for a really long time. But I just want to show you quickly what it sounds like when the back bow is so bad that you're going to lose notes. And it sounds like... That's not good. So what we need to do is go through all the same steps, give the neck some relief, and it should work out that problem for us. So when this thing plays the way that you'd like it to, slap that truss rod cover back on, and that's it. You're done. Give it a day to set, check it again, and just be mindful of it over the next few days. If you've enjoyed this video, again, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, drop me a comment down below. There's links for all kinds of really great ways to support Madman Music that totally give back to you. So check the description for all kinds of really good stuff. And we will see you in the next video. Peace! So the first thing that you need to think about when you are going to address your... The first thing that's gonna... How do you know when you need to... Let's throw some distortion on it.